For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and this is Up in the Rafters, where I'm joined by Carolina basketball legend and 2017 national champion Justin Jackson. Justin, happy holidays to you and your family. A happy new year to everybody that listens or watches this podcast. For Carolina basketball, 2 games since the last time we talked. They go on the road at Pittsburgh. They were up, I think, 9 in the second half. They wind up losing that game, and then they rebound last night back in Chapel Hill against Wake Forest. What have kind of been your takeaways watching this North Carolina team these past 2 games when they were riding a 4-game win streak and they kind of take that step back against Pitt and then bounce back against Wake?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, I think both games are it's a totally different storyline. Against Pittsburgh, honestly, Pittsburgh just kind of seemed like they wanted it a little bit more. You kind of see down the stretch. Defensively, North Carolina just didn't really give much resistance. It was almost like Pittsburgh was just putting their heads down and just driving to the basket every single possession. Not too worried about their defense. So you kind of saw that, and then obviously took that loss. But then I think against Wake Forest, you saw a little bit more, a little bit more energy on the defensive end. Some guys played really well offensively. I think a few guys that you aren't necessarily expecting um, to produce like they did against Wake Forest did. And I think you just kind of saw a different kind of play out of them. So, obviously it's tough to take a loss, any game in the ACC. But for them to bounce back against Wake Forest and come out with a win, I think that was big for them.
Yeah, I don't want to harp on the Pittsburgh game too much since it was, you know, uh last year already, December 30th. But Armando Bacot, I thought, had a pretty worrying quote after that game where he said, playing at a school like North Carolina, you got to go out there and just want to win. I guess we didn't care. Do you see a lack of care? Do you see a lack of identity for this team? Where are they running into these problems where the neutral game sites where you do have that tournament like atmosphere, you're getting the best team, the best version of this North Carolina team where they look like last year's team? Where do you kind of see the biggest problems for this North Carolina team?
I think honestly, I think what we need to, and this goes for fans, whatever. What we need to realize is this is the same team who struggled very much so at the beginning of last season, right? And we're talking about the same team minus Brady, plus obviously a good player like Pete Nance, but minus Brady, who did a ton for them. They struggled a whole lot in the early part of the season last year and got hot at the perfect time and then made an unbelievable run. Um, so I think going into this season, because of the run that they made, I think things were a little overhyped. They put a little too much pressure on the team. Um, but I don't think that the players, when they go out there, they just say, I don't care about North Carolina. I don't care about this team. I don't care about if we win or not. Um, I think there's a lot of aspects within the game that might cause their care level to kind of waver at times, whether that's making shots or the other team making a run or things getting a little more tougher at times for them on the court. But I don't think there's a non-care factor to the team. They still are athletes who are competitors. I think they still want to win. I just think there's things that they sometimes don't focus on enough within the game that causes problems for them, whether that's on the defensive end or it's offensively getting the right guys shots at the right times, getting guys touches, whatever it might be. So I think that's kind of what it is this team is kind of what they are, right? They're RJ and Caleb Love guard heavy. They're Armando Bacot down low, getting every rebound and dominating on the block. And then it's who is that next person that can step up and do something for them? Because at the end of the day, especially once you get in ACC play, you have to have a full team that can contribute throughout the game. Um, and so I think that's what was so good about watching this Wake Forest game was you had guys who were able to step up. And even when Caleb Love was kind of struggling, they were able to step up and kind of take on that role in a game where he was just kind of off. So I think that's kind of how we have to look at it as fans, and obviously, as supporters and cheerleaders almost sometimes. We have to realize what this team is. They're a very talented team, but they're the same team that struggled at the same time last year. And hopefully they can kind of get this momentum going with this win against Wake Forest and kind of get going earlier than last year. But that's just, I think we have to not put as much pressure on this team to be the number one team in the country. When really they might not be until midway through ACC play or going into the ACC tournament, whatever it might be. So I think that's kind of what I've realized and what I think, some people have to kind of realize.
Yeah, and taking a step back and looking at it from like a national type perspective, this isn't just a North Carolina problem that they're having this year. You look around college basketball, just yesterday, for example, 6 ranked teams went on the road against unranked teams. 4 of them lost. It's tough to play on the road. UConn went down to Providence. Miami lost to Georgia Tech. Duke lost on the road at NC State, and I don't remember who Auburn lost to. I think Georgia, but I have to double check that. But can you speak on that a bit? Like, why do you think it is so tough to play on the road in an environment I guess you're just not that familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, it kind of shows that the talent is being spread across, Division One basketball pretty evenly to the point that now every game you go into, there's going to be really good players on the other team. You're not going to have a slouch of a game right now with the way college basketball is. So I think that's one part of it. I think another part of it is, I mean, at the end of the day, conference play is starting up. Everybody knows how important conference play is. You can drop a few before you start conference play, but then once conference play starts, and that's for some teams, especially teams that are kind of at the bottom of the ACC, that's the only way for them to make the tournament is to finish really well in the ACC or win the ACC tournament. So I think it's just kind of a mixture of, talent is being spread across the whole Division One, and now it's tougher games every time you go out, and so I think with where North Carolina is at, they have to realize that, and they also have to realize they have even more pressure on them because they're North Carolina, and that just kind of comes with the territory. So I enjoy it. I enjoy watching basketball where you just really have no idea what might happen within the game, and just seeing two teams kind of fight it out throughout the game. So I'm enjoying the way that college basketball is right now.
And then the last question I have from the Pittsburgh game before we move to the Wake Forest game specifically, and then looking forward, Carolina, they were up 9 midway through the second half. From your experience in basketball, how do you kind of work on that killer instinct when you have your foot on a team's neck and you kind of have to keep applying that pressure because, like you mentioned, teams do have talent. 9 points really isn't, unless you're playing at UVA, 9 points really isn't 9 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's I think a lot of times teams and maybe even coaches sometimes they fall into, okay, we're up now, we need to just kind of play almost conservative, right? Like you almost turn from trying to win to just trying not to lose. And I think a lot of times when you switch your mindset to that, that's whenever you just kind of get complacent. Things happen that wouldn't normally happen. So I think it's just a matter of playing the same way throughout the whole game. And then if you get to the end of the game and you're up 20 and you want to kind of waste some time, then you can. But throughout the game, you just have to play with the same energy and the same, whether it's the offensive scheme, whether it's defensively having pressure still. You have to play the whole time because, like you said, I mean, there's teams that really want to win even when they're down 9. They're not going to stop playing. So I think it's just a matter of not ever turning to that trying not to lose mentality and just continue to play the same way that got you to having that lead midway through the second half.
A few players we could key on from Carolina's 88-79 win against Wake Forest. The first person I want to talk about, Leaky Black. He goes for 18 points, 6 of 8 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3. He was really their offense in that first half where he scores 14 points. What did you see from him? And then how important is he as an offensive threat for this North Carolina team where if he's hitting these outside shots, his guy can't just sit in the paint and kind of clog up everything for these guards like RJ Davis and Caleb Love who like to get downhill and attack?
Yeah, I mean it's huge. Like we talk about, like there's three guys on the team that when you go into a game on your scouting report, those are the main three guys that you talk about, and that's Caleb Love, RJ, and Armando. And so then after that, you have to have somebody who can kind of who can keep the defense honest. When you look at the shots that Leaky was getting last night that he was knocking down, a lot of them were wide open, not really guarded because they're so worried about those other guys. And so obviously, I think we've been hard at times on Leaky, but I love how he keeps on going back out there and he's taking these shots, you know, whenever he's left open. And I think you can't necessarily plug him in for 18 points every game. But if he's able to hit one or two of those threes where guys just aren't really guarding him and focusing more on helping, then they have to respect him at some level, which obviously opens up the court for other guys. So, I love to see him being aggressive and stepping into those shots, with confidence, and obviously continuing doing what he's doing on the defensive end. So I think he definitely was obviously, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but RJ had a good game. But I think he was honestly kind of the main spark to them being able to pull out that win last night, was just how he was playing aggressively on the offensive end.
Yeah, the other player I think you could make an argument to be that spark plug for this North Carolina team was Seth Trimble. You insert him, he's getting in people's shorts, he's pressing up on them, he's causing a lot of havoc with turnovers. What did you kind of see from him and his ceiling as a defender when Carolina does go with a lineup of some combination of RJ Davis, Caleb Love, and Seth?
Yeah, I mean he's a he's obviously smaller, but he's athletic and quick, so he can get up into guards a little bit more, and kind of speed that offense up and get them out of the rhythm that they want to just run their offense with. And I just like how steady he is. There's never really a time where you can say, even though he's a freshman, where you can say that, okay, he was kind of rushed a little bit in that situation, or, defensively, he just looked like he was kind of lost. Like he's so steady and solid that I think he's somebody that you can just rely in and day out to just do the right thing, whether that is getting up and pressuring on defense or running the team on offense or attacking, trying to get other people involved. So I love the way Seth, not even just this game, but how he's been playing throughout this, the start of this season, especially coming in as a freshman and you're trying to figure out what your role might be, how you might get playing time. I love how he's been playing, so hopefully he can kind of keep that up for him.
Yeah, from Hubert Davis's post game, when talking about Seth Trimble defensively, he said one of the many reasons why we recruited him, he's just gifted athletically. He's a special defensive player. He could stay in front of the ball. He could rebound the basketball. He can make plays off the ball. He can get steals and deflections. And despite his height, he's pretty strong, so you can't post him up either. He's a really special defensive player, but he was really good offensively for us as well. He had a career high 11 points. The other thing I wanted to talk about from Coach Davis's press conference after the Wake Forest game, he was kind of talking about, how he keeps the team focused during stoppages and plays whenever they're back at the bench. And he was saying, like, he's talking to them about their high schools, or, Armando's teaching him a new word. He's making jokes with them about that. How, what's your experience like with those stoppages of play, and like what do you think about Hubert's approach that he kind of just wants to keep the guys loose and maybe, less thinking out there?
Yeah, I mean, Coach Davis is what I would consider a player's coach, from the standpoint of, for one, he's played, not just at North Carolina and the NBA, but he's played a good amount of basketball to kind of understand the feel of what a player might be thinking or what they're doing at a certain time on the court. Um, so he's able to kind of, whether it's encouraging or talk to the players in a way that he knows would be received well. Um, and then at the end of the day, Coach Davis is just a great guy. Like he's just, take him out of the head coaching role of North Carolina, and he's just a great guy that you can have a conversation with, you can joke around with, you can talk about serious stuff with. Um, and you're going to feel extremely comfortable with them. So obviously his approach at times is to try to keep everything light and free and try to keep everybody's spirits up, which I think me personally is kind of the best way to coach. Um, and so I think that's just kind of his way. That's his way of doing it, whether it's making jokes or it's talking about old good memories, whatever it is that he's doing. Um, I think it's one of the better ways to keep guys engaged into how you're coaching. Because if you're always just bashing them or getting upset with them or whatever, there's never going to be a time where they just feel completely comfortable with you. So I love Coach Davis. I'm one of the biggest Coach Davis supporters. So I think he just needs to keep doing what he's doing.
Yeah, he said they were laughing in the huddle when they were talking about all the things that I previously mentioned. What was a Coach Williams huddle like? Do you have any memorable huddles?
um, I mean, it really wasn't. I can't really tell. I can't. There was a couple of times Coach Williams would be laughing a little bit in the huddle. But for the most part, Coach Williams was so about his business. Like he would talk with the assistants before he would come to the huddle. Then he would come to the huddle, and
Not
it
waste
was
a second.
whatever it was that we need to be working on. Then that's what he would talk about. He would drop a play if he needed to, whatever. And that's kind of it. But I mean, Coach Williams, he was, even though he was so serious, he was also, I tell people all the time, like he was like a grandfather. Like if you need to go talk to him about something serious or joke with him or whatever, you could do the same thing. It was just a different kind of way that he did it. So I don't have any stories like that about talking about slang words or anything like that. But obviously Coach Williams did his thing and he's the GOAT in my mind. So it didn't really matter.
Against Wake Forest, Carolina forced 15 turnovers and they got 32 points off those turnovers, a ridiculous amount, especially when you're only winning by 9 points. What did you see from them outside of, just Seth defensively that kind of led to not only the turnovers, but being able to score off those turnovers as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's just we talked about this in I think it was the Ohio State game. When they play with pressure and they're picking up, at least at the half court line or maybe even a little further, just the energy level of their defense just goes up a totally different level. Now, obviously, you can't necessarily expect it to be reasonable to press all game long because guys still need to score on the other end. But when they're up, picking up full court, and they're pressuring, denying, making catches tough, I think that's whenever they're at their best. And that's whenever they're able to get out in transition and take advantage of those turnovers that they cause, which just makes their half court offense even easier because you don't have as much pressure to go get a bucket in the half court because you've already had 15 points in transition off of turnovers. So I think when they pressure, and obviously last night Seth was kind of the anchor for that. When they pressure and pick up, I think that's when they're at their best. So I don't know I'm sure Coach Davis obviously is talking to them about trying to do that from the jump, starting out. But I think that's when they're at their best. So hopefully they can kind of take that and take it into the start of each and every game going forward and not have to get into that catch-up mode where they have to start pressing like they had to in Ohio State. So I think last night was really good in the way that they played defensively, and it just caused their offense to be so much easier.
And the past two games for Carolina has kind of been a microcosm for their season where it seems like, they take a step forward, then they take a step back, then they take the step forward to make you think that they've righted the ship. Going forward for this North Carolina team in terms of consistency, how do they build off this Wake Forest win and kind of avoid those letdowns against teams like Pittsburgh where they are up almost double digits in the second half?
I think it's just I don't want to always sound like a broken record, like I'm just saying the same things over and over again. But when they're at their best, their energy level and their energy is at a totally different level than whenever they're struggling or things are tougher for them. When you see them playing at their best is when they're picking up full court, they're pressuring. You see Caleb Love denying passes and getting over screens, and RJ's doing the same, and Mondo's there to try to protect the rim. Like, you just see their effort and energy level at a totally different level. And I don't know necessarily what it is that they have to do to have that every game. Um, but I think for them, in the back of their mind, should be, okay, for us to win a championship, this is the level that we have to play at on both sides of the floor. And if we can keep that energy, shots are going to fall, shots are not going to fall sometimes. It's just, that's how basketball is. But if we can keep that energy level at the same level, that can make up for so many things. So hopefully they can do that. I think that's when they're at their best. So I think just their energy and effort is their main thing that they have to focus on.
Yeah, and just from like my perspective, like just coaching at like the high school level, it's tough to get your guys at that like 100% level for game after game. Some days they're at 75%, some days they're at 90%, but it's almost like trying to have fake energy at times. So everybody kind of feeds off that and builds off that. And that's kind of one of the reasons why, like, I'm concerned about this North Carolina team because they do have those moments like Pitt. But the reason why I'm not like in a full-fledged panic is because I think they've shown, like, when you do get into these tournament type settings, you're going to get the best version of their team, where it's like, if this team can just get to the tournament, if they could just get to the ACC tournament, if they could just get to that first weekend in the NCAA tournament, they do have the talent to where, okay, now you're getting everybody's best version, but at the same time, you're also getting the other team's best version, and it is playing a dangerous game trying to get to the tournament like that. But we will see how North Carolina builds off the Wake Forest game. Saturday, they're back in Chapel Hill against Notre Dame, and then next Tuesday, it's the dreaded trip to Charlottesville against number 11 UVA. We will be back after that game. Justin, appreciate the time as always. Appreciate everybody watching or listening.
Appreciate you, man.